Dear audience, good Thursday. This is Jingbo Wang from Shanghai SNAMI and senior expert of Marine Design and Research Institute of China. As an important part of the Marintec China, which will be held in Shanghai this December, the Senior Maritime Forum focuses on hot topics in the maritime industry, including the just concluded IMO MIPEC 80 meeting. To help better understand this meeting and take appropriate action, the organizers of Marintec China, Shanghai SNAMI, and Informa Markets have jointly invited Norbert Cray to interpret and make suggestions. Mr. Cray is Senior Vice President and Country Chair, Great China, from DNV Group.
Yes, hello, Dr. Wang. Nice to meet you again.
So do I. Well, I'd like to briefly introduce Mr. Cray. He has assumed the current position since January the 1st, 2018. Based in Shanghai, he is responsible for overseeing and strengthening DNV's maritime business in Greater China, strategically one of the most important regions for DNV Group. Mr. Cray is a trained naval architect. In 1997, he became DNV surveyor. Since 2002, he has represented DNV in committees of the IX and appointed as Senior Vice President in 2008. Before coming to China, he was Regional Manager for Maritime in Japan since 2014. Dear Cray, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Well, the MIPEC 80 meeting has proposed a new greenhouse gas GHG reduction strategy, which will have a profound impact on the entire maritime industry. As a classification society with global influence, DNV's interpretation and suggestion will be much helpful to the maritime industry. Well, our first question is, how do you evaluate the important progress made by MIPEC 80 in terms of ship energy efficiency and GHG emission reduction? Great, please.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this interview, Dr. Wang. And MEPC 80 made a significant step forward on the decarbonization of shipping, setting a net zero target by around 2050, as well as ambitious intermediate checkpoints in 2030 and 2040. And another important part of the strategy is a clear timeline for developing measures which should be adopted by 2025 and enter into force by 2027. These measures will include a technical well-to-wake GHG intensity requirement on fuel and energy, as well as an economic element setting a price on the GHG emissions.
Thanks for your comments. The progress from the meeting is really impressive and important. Well, the new strategy reads to peak GHG emission from international shipping as soon as possible and to reach net zero GHG emissions by or around 2050, as you just mentioned. How do you understand the important timeline 2050 and net zero? And what is your suggestion from technical viewpoint? Great, please.
Yes, I think setting a clear target for achieving net zero in 2050 means that the fuel transition needs to start and accelerate within the next decade. And a net zero target means that emissions and sustainability of fuel production must be addressed. The IMO has already started the work through the adoption of life cycle assessment guidelines for fuels. And this is the key guideline for determining the requirements to future fuels. And we also expect that onboard carbon capture will be addressed in the guidelines as well in the future.
Thanks. Very clear timeline and clear goals. Thanks for your analysis and suggestion. Well, to clarify the decarbonization path of the international maritime industry, the strategy has set up indicative checkpoints for 2030 and 2040, which says to reduce the total annual GHG emissions from international shipping by at least 20%, striving for 30% by 2030 compared to 2008, and to reduce by at least 70%, striving for 80% by 2040. How do you interpret and evaluate this strategy, and what is your advice to marine industry? Please.
Well, I think the checkpoints are important as they indicate that early reduction is also important. And these checkpoints will be important to consider when developing new measures and also for the review of the CII and EEXI regulations due in 2025. And DNV's advice is that shipping companies develop decarbonization strategies for both the existing fleet and also for their new building program to ensure that they are ready for net zero operations in the future. The strategy should address both energy efficiency as well as what fuels to use. For the time being, fuel flexibility will be important, while all efforts should be put into improving energy efficiency, as future fuels for sure will be going to be more expensive.
Okay, nice. It's very important to increase energy efficiency and also future fuels. However, the task is still quite challenging. Your explanation and advice should be very valuable and helpful. The new strategy proposes uptake of zero or near zero GHG emission technologies, fuels and all energy sources to represent at least 5%, striving for 10% of the energy used by international shipping by 2030. How to achieve this target, and what is your prediction of global clear fuel supply, and what challenges will it face from experience? Please.
Yeah, thank you for this very good question, Dr. Wang. And over time, we assess that it is fully possible to scale up the fuel production. In the short term, to 2030, it is more challenging for sure, but biofuels are likely to be important and should be sufficient to cover the 5 to 10% target. The IMO just issued a circular on the application of biofuels under the existing regulations. And on-board carbon capture is also a promising solution, but the barriers remain on the technology maturity, permanent storage, and also on the regulations. But over the time, electrofuels will be more important as access to renewable energy and production will scale up.
Okay. Sustainable supply of clear fuel might be a challenge. Thanks for your analysis and remarks. Well, on January the 1st, 2026, a comprehensive assessment of short-term measures such as EEXI, CII, statutory requirements and guidelines will be made. What's DNV's predictions or estimations where EEXI and CII will go in the future? And what are your recommendations for maritime industry? Please.
Well, in the first review, we expect that the CII continues to be applicable with the reduction requirements set to 2030 and with improvements on the method and correction. We also expect a stricter enforcement of the CII. And in parallel, we will see further measures to develop over time, and we expect to see a streamlining of the regulations from the IMO, which could mean further changes to CII and EEDI. Nevertheless, we, however, do not think that the EEXI will further strengthen unless we also see a more or similar strengthening of the EEDI. And in the short term, the maritime industry will have to live with a fragmented regulatory framework with IMO regulations developing and regional requirements in the EU with the Fuel EU and EU ETS. And it remains to be seen if the regional regulations are sunset, if the IMO develops equally effective regulations. And DNV's recommendation is to continue to focus on improving energy efficiency, both technically and operationally, and to prepare for future fuels. reducing the carbon footprint will reduce regulatory and commercial risks in the future.
Yes, very important, both from technical and operational point of view. Thanks for your helpful prediction and enlightening recommendation. Well, Mr. Cray, thank you very much for your wonderful analysis and generous sharing. I believe it will be of great help to the entire maritime industry. I'm still sure DNV will continue to make more valuable contributions to the maritime industry and the GHG emission reduction. We look forward to meeting you in Shanghai at coming Senior Maritime Forum.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Wang, for this nice interview. And I really appreciate it. And as you mentioned, we have here in early December the Marintec in Shanghai. It's the first Marintec after COVID, and I'm really looking forward to it. And for sure, we all invite our good customers here from China and also from abroad to visit us here in Shanghai. And I wish you good luck with the Marintec. Thank you so much.
The same like for you, and see you. Well, our dear audience, on September 7, we will continue to organize webinar on new fuels and new energy. So stay tuned and pay attention. Thank you, and bye.